Digital skills for cultural and creative industries continues today with the podcast dedicated to digital fashion. My name is Aika Aleme, and I will be talking today with Tamaris Ellins from London. Hi, Tamaris. She's a creative technologist, digital fashion designer, working at the intersection of fashion, digital technology, and immersive experiences. Hi, Tamaris.
Hi.
First of all, everyone is like me is curious about how you started in the digital fashion milieu. How did you make your first steps and why?
So I began actually being extremely fascinated by photography, and yeah, my skills sort of developed into 3D from behind the camera very naturally because you end up lighting things digitally and you have that sort of comprehension of scene design and setup and models. And that's how I sort of began my journey, was through the sort of post-production side of my imagery. So I was obsessed with Photoshop and all this like 2D layering on softwares. So I then moved into 3D after doing an internship in the Great Wanderer Studios in Berlin. And that was really influential for me, and it kind of laid the groundwork for my workflows and my niche in cinema 4D. I then carried on and became a studio assistant alongside my studies at London College of Fashion, 3D studio. So not directly linked to fashion, but enabled me to sort of like develop my techniques and at a studio and really push my skills. And then from there, I kind of graduated into the Royal College of Art to do a fashion master's. And I became really interested in the phygital. So the intersection of the physical and the virtual, and what I like to call the real and the unreal, and sort of found this coalesced process where I was referring to sort of hybrid experiences that span across both realities. So I feel like my work is actually sort of intrinsic in both. Like I don't treat digital fashion necessarily as a separate world, but my practice moves between sort of digital couture, speculative fashion, and accessory design.
Yeah, I know you're into hyper real and data-driven garments and also 3D modeling and VFX. Um, how would you characterize the main trends that exist right now in and growing in the digital fashion today?
So I would say digital fashion is definitely no longer an experimental niche, but it's very much an integrated part of the broader fashion industry. Of course, the metaverse continues to be a key driver of digital fashion, with the avatar economy, with platforms such as Roblox and Fortnite, where people can buy and wear digital outfits and dress up their avatars, and having sort of an infinitely expanding wardrobe, but there's no limit to the amount of garments you can store. Um, the brand collaborations with big brands like Balenciaga and Fortnite, and really pushing sort of the gaming side of things. Sort of seeing gaming as like the new kind of catwalk, I guess. Sustainability, of course, is a massive deal, with a lot of the fashion industry producing more carbon emissions than ever. So digital design sort of moves towards the zero waste. There's no shipping, there's much less impact on the planet in terms of a lot of brands are starting to use 3D first sampling, which really drastically reduces the need for physical prototypes and cuts costs and lead times. Um, Naturally, AI, of course, which helps designers with their process and testing within seconds different prints, textures, variations that sort of like accelerate the digital fashion process. So it becomes sort of like a symbiotic process between AI and more traditional digital fashion pathways. Um, of course, to create the immersion of digital fashion, there comes into AR and VR. So AR is augmented reality, and that lets you see how a digital outfit looks on you in real time, like a Snapchat filter, AR try-ons. I know that Zara and H&M are doing AR filters where basically it matches to the body shape and it changes depending on the lighting. So it's actually reducing the amount of returns needed when it comes to the traditional shopping process. Um, NFTs are also massive. We've got Louis Vuitton sort of leading the way in the blockchain sort of fashion tech side of things. I know that in 2024 they released the varsity jacket, which is like um they did sort of like a phygital, so a digital and physical version of the garment. And that garment was then only accessible to a certain community, the VIA community, which would then be dropped into their wallets, and that would therefore give them more access to community-based servers and releases, and sort of it gives that sort of VIP feeling. So it really helps sort of in community building and brand loyalty. And then finally, I would say digital fashion. So the blending of the real and the virtual is becoming increasingly interesting to fashion brands. So having a jacket where you've got a digital version for your avatar and you can scan sort of these NFC chips, they're near field communication chips where basically it's like a contactless payment. You just use your phone and you can then access exclusive content, a digital passport, which gives certification of the product, which is sort of falling in line with the EU regulations that are coming into force in 2027, where we're trying to sort of make sure that products are legitimate. So that blending is really important. So I'd say creativity, sustainability, and just expressing yourself virtually and physically are the main trends at the moment.
Yeah, it has so many avenues that even just to list them, it takes a while. So it's kind
Yeah.
of fascinating, and of course, the consumer is getting it at the cost that is doesn't break your wallet. But on the other hand, the brands build communities and build even more intimate connections with their customers, and create these aficionado platforms. The people who really appreciate not just the physical fashion but and craftsmanship, but also the digital element, the design and creativity and the connection, which is really cool. But how can one make their first steps in the digital fashion with when an average person would not have the budgets of Louis Vuittons and Balenciagas and all the big labels? How can
Mhm.
just a regular person start in the digital fashion realm?
Yeah, simply, I would say that digital fashion really has broken the barrier to entry into the fashion space. You don't need to buy a whole shed worth of tools. You don't need to get materials. You don't need to get all the machinery. Like it's all very much obviously computer based. So there's a lot of softwares and programs out there which are completely free or inexpensive. The main ones that one would want to use when getting started, I mean, the industry standard is Clo 3D, which does have a subscription. But I would say it's relatively inexpensive compared to if you're making physical garments. But a lot of the main sort of rendering engines, if you want to move from Clo 3D into creating something that's a bit more personalized, a bit more VFX driven, if you've got like an interest in having really specific textures and something that's very hyperreal and sort of more avant-garde, then you can go towards Blender, which is an entirely open source software. Another standard in the industry currently is Unreal Engine, which is like a live rendering engine. So it's much quicker in terms of the output, the way it renders is completely unmatched to the standard 3D softwares. And then you can also push that into creating something that's a bit more immersive, because Unreal is more of a gaming platform. So you can then sort of push the simulation quality of the garment. There's also, I would say, if you're trying to build a collection, then you should probably start with a bit more of a basic garment or an accessory, and then creating like a small capsule collection of like 3 to 5 versatile pieces, and then experimenting with different textures and colors to sort of like multiply the collection size. So just having the basics and then building on that. Most of the 3D designers, including myself, that I know are all self-taught. Everything is extremely accessible through YouTube, online tutorials. There's a lot of communities, forums. You just sort of need to develop a penchant for scrolling the forums and interacting, yeah, with visual content, basically. It'd be great if you could collaborate with other designers. That helps sort of expand the potential of the collection, and leveraging social media to share maybe work in progress clips, or inviting feedback. And yeah, I think the real pro of digital only collections is that, of course, as I said, you avoid the physical production costs. And yeah, this sort of reduces the logistics expenses while targeting digital native audiences, and tapping into sort of the digital marketplaces. So you can create really impactful collections with not a great deal of investment.
Yeah, that's really encouraging for the young and emerging designers, and those who want to cross the border from the physical to the digital fashion, because a lot of physical designers, they have lots of ideas about the digital fashion, but they're a bit afraid of the technology. But since you mentioned that it's kind of forgiving and accessible, and there are lots of tutorial material, then maybe, it's not that difficult to make their first steps. But what are the essential platforms where people can actually showcase their work and eventually sell? Can you list a few?
Yeah, so there's you mean like the selling of the garments?
Yes, if I create, but eventually I want to become commercially successful as well.
Well, they have a lot of platforms. Decentraland is one of the main metaverse platforms that a lot of brands are currently using to showcase their collections. I would say there's sort of well-known ones, like DressX. Um, I think moving more towards the gaming side of things and creating garments using Marvelous Designer, which is basically like Clo 3D, but it's more specific to optimization for gaming platforms. Um, and yeah, just to share, I think sharing the work via social media and to create a following based around your specific design niche, and pushing that towards maybe Lens Studio, filters, things that are really easily digestible, or accessible to a greater amount of people who aren't necessarily signed up to these very niche, or more niche digital marketplaces. Of course, you've got NFTs as well, and platforms like OpenSea, where you could sort of go about finding out how to create assets that are like non-fungible and um, mintable garments on the blockchain, and sort of leveraging a community-based or sort of other related attachments to the NFT to create like an entire business model. I think just generally, yeah, leveraging social media and sort of pushing out your specific design interest, and potentially creating digital work and coalescing the two, especially if you're more used to creating physical garments, might be a really interesting way. Like as I mentioned, the NFC tags to sew them into the lining and to create something that is beyond just the physical piece, but that encapsulates a whole universe of opportunity, I would say.
Yeah, I hear that the community spirit, not only like creating it in social media, but also collaborating with each other is a good way to get started and maybe testing your ideas and just bringing to the table maybe the ideation and the craftsmanship and a sort of an original setting or idea, but then someone who is more savvy in terms of digital skills and implementation could help you out to make your first steps. That's really cool. I really love this subculture of the digital fashion designers, and within that there are several pockets as well who specialize in various aspects of it. But in terms of like this digital fashion and 3D modeling that you mentioned, you also have experience in like the traditional fashion design. How are they different in a nutshell? What are the main principal differences in terms of how do you start, approach, and how do you think about it? And how do you
Yeah.
prototype?
So for me, um, my background is more in fashion communication, but I do have experience in accessories design. That's sort of more my background. Um, but basically, it's completely reimagines the traditional design process. It enhances creativity without physical constraints. So it doesn't matter about fabric availability or gravity even. You can experiment in such an interesting way, and it's a much more embodied and intuitive process um, due to the speed of which you can make adjustments, a simple backspace rather than having to unpick an entire garment or to recut a pattern. It's so much more intuitive. And yeah, it's another thing that I use a lot in my practice is a tool called Gravity Sketch, which is virtual reality based designing software. So it really helps you sort of sculpt intuitively, and it's sort of like a studio and an archive and a stage, and you're entirely embodied in this space through the VR headset, and you can completely immerse yourself into the design. You can blow up and expand the design to a new extreme and sort of inhabit the thing you've just created. It's an extremely corporeal process. So I've been sculpting now since 2021, and it sort of becomes like muscle memory. Um, but yeah, it's just really interesting how immersive technologies can build new narrative experiences, not just like in the final outcome, but in through the act of making itself, and being able to really easily just screen record your process and then share that with the world, and designing through movement. Um, I'm a big proponent of VR based design, basically. But I see it as sort of like a sculptural choreography in a way, because sometimes just sitting behind a screen, a 2D screen to create a 3D outcome, it can be a little bit limiting and a little bit frustrating sometimes. So it's nice to have the opportunity to work in virtual space and experience tactility without any resistance. Um, and just sort of like enjoy this paradox of the materiality of the immaterial. This is something that I sort of find that sits at the core of my practice. And yeah, it really challenges like how we perceive objects and reality. And it's just a really great way to prototype. I think more generally, obviously the faster iteration, so having this rapid design adjustments, modifying colors, patterns, fits in real time, it just really shortens like product development cycles, allowing instant feedback And instead of waiting months to see a physical prototype, you can simulate and test and refine the garments within hours. That obviously really helps when it comes to, let's say you wanted to create like a 3D printed item or any sort of, doesn't matter, any item, you could then share that with the factory and they have like a 3D visualization of the final outcome instead of having to reference 2D imagery. So it makes it much more likely to get the desired outcome. Um, Sustainability, obviously, it helps to gauge the demand. If you've created a 3D asset, you can then maybe share this online and sort of gauge what the interest is before the actual production of something. Let's say if you wanted to make it physical, so preventing overproduction. And also generally, the same digital asset can serve multiple purposes. So if you have garment design in 3D, it can be used for production or like an e-commerce 3D viewer, an AR try-on, social media, gaming outfits. So it creates sort of like a content flywheel, where one design can power extremely broad amount of use cases, unlike the more traditional process of siloed fashion. So yeah, I just see it as a shift towards creative freedom, efficiency, sustainability, and just more intuitive, fun design.
And the scalability as well, because your scaling
Yeah.
is unlimited with the digital form. And also, what I think is quite key, like when you're moving from 2D to 3D, sometimes, for some designers, because they sketch on a piece of paper or like on a computer and it's still a 2D form, but then when you move into the technical sketch and how in 3D reality, how is it possible, is it feasible, your garment or accessory or footwear? That's always a challenge for the new designers, at least, because they don't have the experience of prototyping till the end. And then the human form, human body has its own exigence on top of that,
Yeah.
how you wear, how you sit in it, and how you run in it, and how you stand in it and lie down and stuff like that. So yeah, these limitations
Yeah.
are off. So yeah, that's really cool, and I really love the unlimited creative freedom and how you can actually not limit yourself, not by the color, not by the texture, not by the silhouette or form or shape, and you can just create something that it wouldn't otherwise exist in the physical realm, but in the digital,
Mm.
it's legitimate and it makes money as well.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So yeah, so what are the key skills for the digital fashion designer today? Of course, you should be software savvy and you should not be afraid of technology and you should actually try and do it. And as the more hours you dedicate, of course, the more proficient you get. But in general, how would you characterize the key skills needed for the digital fashion designer?
So I think one of the key skills, it's less of a hard skill, more of a soft skill, is definitely having curiosity. As it's such a fast evolving field. I mean, you have updates to main softwares all the time and things change, and you just need to be very curious to know what the changes are and to stay relevant, as it's such a fast moving landscape. So you really need a good blend of technical and creative and also business skills. Of course, proficiency in Clo 3D and sort of traditional rendering engines like Blender and Cinema 4D are really essential to create realistic virtual garments. But the skills demanded by major fashion houses, so real-time skills are really important. As I said, Unreal Engine is becoming more of a baseline requirement. In terms of like understanding AR and VR technologies, it's really helpful to to give that extra level. And so you're not just creating an animation necessarily or a still, like just a rendered image, but to create something that is more immersive, like a try on or a virtual runway. Um, you've got to be good at collaboration. So having the skills to communicate to more the technical side of digital fashion, sort of the tech experts, but also being able to speak in design and like digestible language, to connect to just the general wider audiences of like design audiences. Um, Designers should have digital marketing skills and social media skills, um, leveraging Instagram, TikTok, content creation, maybe influencer collaborations, um, just having that platform fluency as well in terms of knowing the requirements of publishing garments on different platforms, like whether it's Roblox or any other platform, you need to know obviously the specifics of the files that you need. Um, Having a grounding in digital business models, knowing about licensing, knowing about NFT ownership and sort of token gated commerce, will really help you navigate more the commercial side of digital fashion, having knowledge of the blockchain and having knowledge with minting processes and Ethereum to create and sell the digital fashion assets, and also having a familiarity with industry standards, files, and formats to have in sort of interoperability between different tools, teams, platforms, depending on which part of the process that you're in, um, is really important. So developing your own workflows as well, your own pipeline, um, which is sort of a sequence of tools and processes used to create, edit, and deploy digital content. So having your own sort of way into creating something which makes you stand out maybe from another designer because the tools or the process or let alone the style is different and that will appeal to different types of people. And just being adaptable, preparing for lifelong learning, just continuous learning through online courses and workshops and getting involved in industry events as well, getting outside and yeah, just meeting creators in the field and chatting together about the intersection of fashion, technology, and the industry at large.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hear that it's not just the technical skills, although it's a big part of the job, but also even like the legal issues in terms of rights, intellectual property rights, how
Yeah.
it all works and how they're all cleared and where they're going because it's evolving. And of course, everyone today is talking about AI replacing people. So how can you stay ahead of the game? And I know when we talked to you, you mentioned that like beyond the learning the software skills and all the other soft skills that you mentioned, the perceptual and the critical, the conceptual thinking skills are also key. How can one develop those? And what is your personal experience? Where do you see the sources of inspiration and how do you develop yourself? Although you said that a lot of the digital fashion designers are self-learners. So what are your routines in that area?
Yeah. Um, so I would say that it's good, of course, to be really good at visual research and just having an interest in visual culture and digesting even the smallest things, and being able to stitch together different references just innately, pulling references and things that just really speak to you and being able to maybe remix or find the way the threads that sort of like connect your interest in the references plus your own personal background and how that can create something really unique and nuanced and yeah, very rich. Um, I think developing a critical eye is really one of the most important digital skills today. So it's not just about knowing the tools, as we said, it's more about also recognizing the nuances of fakery. Um, so when something looks convincingly real, or whether it tips into the uncanny or the too digital sort of aesthetic. So that's something that really fascinates me, is something sometimes a digital asset can carry sort of the trace of the real more vividly than reality itself. And that's something that I really explored theoretically in my master's at Royal College of Art. This idea of the reality of unreality. And I think that's where sort of my interest in reality and hyperrealism becomes a skill in of itself, because it's all about creating simulations that feel more real than real. Like it's about blurring the boundary between truth and deception. So it's not just about style, but it's about cultivating perception, and knowing how far you can push the textures and the surfaces and the avatars before they lose credibility. And when they become sort of uncanny to make a statement. So it's about the nuance of fakery, basically. That's something that we in Fashion Innovation Agency actually explored recently with a project called Reskinning Reality, which was a new kind of pipeline that basically fuses volumetric capture with digital couture and VFX workflows. So one live performance is scanned in full 3D and then it's reskinned, which is basically there's hyperreal garments layered on top that exist as data, simulated fibers, layered textures, particle-driven surfaces. And for me, that project really embodies hyperrealism in practice. So seeing garments that feel tangible and tactile at like a hyper detailed level with the captures, even, you know, recognizing down to the blinking. So it's super hyper real. And yeah, I think the critical eye really helps designers make sharper choices. So how to present digital garments, how to merge them with physical collections, how to use AI without falling into cliche. It really asks us to think not only about what we create, but how it's perceived and how it's trusted. And I think that balance between creativity and deception is really a crucial digital competence for the next generation of cultural and creative practitioners.
Yeah, especially when this field is like so easy to make your first steps and enter. So of course it's like hyper competition, especially with the young generation. They're very digital savvy. So for them, it's a natural continuation of their beings. So how does one stand out among these I don't know, ocean of all kinds of versions of digital fashion and all kinds of visions? What do you do to stand out and be noticed?
I think just sort of really doubling down on what makes you tick, what is your signature, having a really strongly defined aesthetic is something that is always going to make you stand out. It's always going to make you memorable, and it's going to keep people coming back for more because they want this particular thing that you've got going on. They want to have that sort of and I think just sort of really knowing who you are is really important, and being able to maybe share parts of your personality through the garments, like having something that is very rich and meaningful as well, like having sort of an understanding of why you're creating a certain garment, why you're using certain textures, what that's demonstrating about who you are and what you're interested in, and maybe what part of the world you're in, and sort of connecting the dots between your personality and the stylistic choices you're making. I would say, yeah, just having a really strong signature is one of the key things in digital fashion.
And what makes you emotional and I don't know, makes you even, I don't know, cry, maybe
Yeah.
experience something not so positive. Sometimes, the artist doesn't study them, him or herself, but actually our original motivation always shows in our work, even if we don't realize it.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely.
That's really cool advice. Well, thank you so much. But I also wanted to ask you this question about how can brands today, integrate the digital element in their physical collection. We've seen during the pandemic that they tried their hand at the virtual fashion, and of course, since then it evolved so much. So, what is the state today with the digital fashion?
So in terms of the digital fashion, um, creating digital twins and tying in sort of digital experiences that enhance like the brand value and the consumer engagement is a really like exciting strategy in fashion at the moment. Um, the NFC chips and linking that to the physical garments to unlock digital assets. I think currently have this sort of music linked clothing where there's these hoodies and there's a guy who designs the soundtracks for their shows and they've got this curated playlist linked to the NFC chip and a game where they're going to do some sort of competition and then give out prizes. So it creates this sort of community based activation to have virtual try-ons. So the AR tools using the digital twin of the physical garment to let consumers more generally virtually try on the physical garments before purchase, reducing the returns and enhancing maybe the decision-making process in online shopping. And I know there's a big problem with all this shipment and the returns constantly. So it really helps to reduce the waste. And I think also having hybrid fashion shows. I think where digital avatars mimic human models allows brands to showcase more globally their collections, not just being limited to the physical location of the physical fashion shows, but being able to expand that worldwide. Um, Creating digital only versions of physical collections and gaming communities. I think Louis Vuitton again is a good example of I think a collaboration they did with League of Legends and yeah, creating skins that promoted their physical campaign. And just having like a cross-platform interoperability, so ensuring that the digital assets are compatible across physical, obviously being legitimate to wear, and then digital as well. So having that standards around the digital creation process. Um, Digital collections are great with like sustainability messaging and an emphasis on digital prototyping and on-demand production of physical items rather than it being overproduced and then sold and potentially not everything being sold. So it helps, yeah, really on the sustainability front as well.
Yeah, I see that, of course, we live in the multidisciplinary world today, and I see how digital fashion integrated the storytelling and the the gaming and the filmmaking and dramatic arts connection where people actually come for another portion. And it's like sequel after sequel. So episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. So I think unexpectedly, digital fashion humanized the connection with the customers who are completely not loyal at all. They could buy from all kinds of brands, and they don't give you a guarantee that they're going to come back. But here, the digital fashion creates this bond with the brand and actually personalize your experience, which I find really magical and fascinating.
Yeah, it keeps people coming back for more.
Yes. So it's like, almost like binge watching the TV series or something like that.
It's addictive, yeah.
Listen, Tamaris, thank you so much for this conversation. Just at the closing, I just wanted you to maybe share, some message to the young and emerging designers or people who don't have experience with digital fashion. What would you say to our audience?
So yeah, I would say that leading with curiosity and intuition is really important, and not getting too caught up about maybe the first draft or the second draft of a garment, and just persevering with the process and continuing to try and allowing your body and your heart sort of to lead the process rather than your brain, and just leading with yeah, just loving the process and not being too outcome driven, just enjoying every step of the way and just getting stuck into creating in a way that is completely detached from physical constraints. It's really exciting.
Really cool. And what also from our conversation is be you. Listen to your voice. Hear you. Be in the silence. Allow yourself to hear it. Maybe it's not so pronounced, but when you listen carefully, it comes out and it actually will show in your work. Thank you so much. It was a conversation on digital fashion with Tamaris ELLINS, creative technologist, digital designer who works at the intersection of fashion, digital innovation, and immersive experience. And this podcast was within the framework of the project supported by UNESCO regional office in Almaty, called Digital Skills for Cultural and Creative Industries.